about 200 miles southeast of Miami. All hell was breaking loose on the bridge of El Faro, an 800-foot cargo ship heading straight into Hurricane Joaquin, a Category 4 storm with sustained winds of 155 miles per hour with gusts to 200 miles per hour accompanied by 50-foot seas. El Faro had lost all engine power and was now listing sideways on its port or left side, helpless in the water, an 80-story building being kicked around by the wind and the waves. 31 of 33 crew had already abandoned ship in survival suits and life rafts. Left on the bridge were the captain and one crewman. On the now sideways bridge, the captain was at the top and the crewman was at the bottom, with the captain imploring the crewman to climb to him to get to safety.
You gotta get to safety, Seaman. You gotta get to safety. Climb to me.
I'm going down. I'm going down.
You're not going down. Come on. Don't panic. Don't panic. Work your way up here. You're okay. Come on. Don't freeze.
You're gonna leave me. You're gonna leave me.
I'm not leaving you.
End of recording from El Faro's Black Box.
It's the evening of September 29th, 2015. The aging 792-foot cargo ship El Faro was at the dock in Jacksonville, Florida, creaking and groaning as the last of the 300 containers and 400 cars and trucks were finished loading, and El Faro was getting ready to pull out for its usual 5-day voyage to San Juan, Puerto Rico. Michael Davidson, the 53-year-old captain, was an experienced mariner and was informed about a tropical storm that was brewing that could be in his path.
Hey, Cap. Looks like you might be sailing into some weather.
But hey, the Red Sox are leading 1-0.
Less than 36 hours later, El Faro was at the bottom of the sea and all 33 crew were lost. Going back to ancient times, the captain of a ship had unequivocal authority. It was not a democracy. Whatever the captain said, that's the way it was. When you boarded a ship as a deckhand, you knew it. Everybody who boarded El Faro that day, along with Captain Davidson, knew he was in charge. What maybe they didn't know was that Captain Davidson had an application pending with the owner of El Faro, Tote Maritime. Tote owned several ships like El Faro, and Davidson had an application pending for a promotion to captain more complex voyages on bigger and more modern ships. Davidson's lust for the upside blinded him to the risks, and this is one of the 7 Deadly Stupidities. While the Jacksonville to Puerto Rico trip was considered routine, there's nothing routine about being at sea. In the last 10 years, almost 900 large ships were lost at sea. That's almost 2 large ships per week. And nobody believes me whenever I tell them this stat, so go look it up yourself. And many of these ships are lost without a trace. No distress calls, no wreckage, nothing. The obvious primary cause of the El Faro disaster was the weather. As the ship departed Jacksonville, Tropical Storm Joaquin was moving north as the ship was heading south. Think about El Faro's path as a diagonal from Jacksonville out to San Juan, Puerto Rico, rather than going straight down the coast of the United States and then breaking out to the east. It took a diagonal course, which was normal, straight to San Juan. But for any experienced mariner, storms are not a big deal. They're used to them. Many times they just go right through them. And in this case, there are many questions asked as to what happened. And our theory is the captain was blinded by the upside of making the delivery on time, preserving his reputation, and getting that promotion. Weather has always been important to any seagoing operation. In fact, there's a story about when John Kennedy was coming in as president. outgoing President Eisenhower, who was the leader of all the Allied forces in World War II in Europe, and he led the famous D-Day invasion in Normandy, France, which was an amphibious assault where the ships brought the soldiers to the beach and so on. And Kennedy asked Eisenhower, why did D-Day go so well for us? And Eisenhower had a simple answer. We had better meteorologists than the Germans. A botched weather forecast, too many waves, too much wind in the wrong direction, and we would have been wiped out at Normandy. We might live in a different world than we live in today. So going to present day, Faro relied on several different sources of weather. National Hurricane Center, there's all kinds of satellite weather forecasts, and the one the captain preferred was the Bon Voyage system, the BVS system. The BVS delivered colorful graphics and all that right to the captain's email, so he preferred it. Everybody has their preferences. So at this point, we have Faro out of Jacksonville, heading south towards Puerto Rico at 25 miles per hour, and Tropical Storm Joaquin, which soon would build into Hurricane Joaquin, is heading north at 15 miles per hour. Remember, tropical storm is still winds of 50, 60 miles an hour, just not above 75 miles per hour on a sustained basis, which makes it a hurricane. So you still had a pretty nasty storm coming north as Faro was heading south. And the problem that the captain had was the BVS weather reports were great, but they were somewhat out of date. For some reason, they were 6 hours behind all of the other weather, even the Weather Channel that some of the crew were listening to on their phone. So using the speeds above, if you're heading south at 25 miles per hour, the storm's heading north at 15 miles per hour. If you're 6 hours off, you're going to be almost 250 miles closer together in those 6 hours. In 12 hours, you're going to pretty much close the gap between where you are and the storm. And so if you're looking at weather data that's 6 hours old, you can see the problem it'll cause. And remember, another fact here is that in a typical hurricane, the distance from the eye to the outer wall is about 200 miles. So a storm's big. A big Caribbean hurricane has a radius of 200 miles. That's a diameter of 400 miles. It takes up the whole ocean. So about 8 hours into the voyage, we're now about 6 a.m. the next morning. The ship left port about 10 at night. The captain is overheard on the voice recorder saying, no need to make any course changes for a 40-knot wind. 40 knots is 46 miles per hour. But he was using the BVS data that was now 6 hours old to judge the wind because the wind meter on the ship was broken. Truth was, Joaquin had now blossomed into a full-blown hurricane, so what was really going on outside the ship were 80-knot winds or 90-plus mile-an-hour winds, and the seas were intensifying. So right here you have confusion starting to enter the picture. The conditions outside the ship and data from other sources of weather conflicted with what the BVS data were telling the captain and what the captain felt was right. Yet all of the focus remained on making the delivery on time and getting into port. The second mate on the ship was 34-year-old Danielle Randolph. Randolph was a graduate of the Maine Maritime Academy, one of the handful of maritime academies in the U.S. that grants bachelor's degrees in different marine disciplines. For Randolph, it was marine transportation. As she stood on the bridge, she was bracing herself against the seas that were kicking Faro around like a soccer ball, and she was concerned. The captain was on his break and was in his cabin.
I'm going to give the captain a call.
After Davidson woke up to answer the phone, Danielle broke him the news.
It isn't looking good. We need a major course change to avoid the storm.
The worst of the storm is behind us. Stay on course.
After hearing that, Danielle turns to her crewmates and says,
He said to run it.
After her shift ended, Danielle went back to her cabin and banged out an email to her mom.
We're heading straight for the hurricane. Give my love to everyone.
Later that night, Frank Ham, a 49-year-old helmsman, said to the captain, "Hey, do you think we should turn around?" Davidson said, "Oh, no, we're not going to turn around." The thing about El Faro is, at 25 miles per hour, it could have turned around and went straight back to Jacksonville and outrun the storm with no problem. Remember, the storm only runs at 15 miles per hour. But that wasn't Davidson's plan. He was not going to make what he would call a minor course adjustment that could really affect the timing and the cost of his delivery, not with that application pending. As the ship was being blown around, Davidson is overheard saying things like, "Hey, we're not that much off course. It's just a minor diversion. Hey, Chief, you feeling comfortable?" This is Davidson trying to reassure himself that things are okay, when meanwhile, we have Joaquin is now a Category 2 hurricane, and they're heading straight into it. Sensing there was a problem, Danielle returned to the bridge in the middle of her shift in her street clothes. The captain nodded in acknowledgement at her, and they both looked at the RPM gauge. The RPMs are the revolutions per minute of the propellers.
Did we come down on the RPM? Or did the engine room do that?
Davidson shakes his head. "No, I didn't give any orders to reduce RPM. What's happening here is El Faro is losing power, just as Joaquin is now building into a Category 3 storm." As containers and cars and trucks were starting to spill all over the deck, Danielle is overheard saying,
"There goes the lawn furniture."
Minutes later, the captain and Danielle are staring at the RPM gauge, and it drops to 0. The captain turns to Randolph and says, "I think we just lost the power plant." Incredibly, more than a half hour had passed since El Faro had lost power, and the captain finally made his first call to the shore. Every commercial shipping company has what are called qualified individuals, a QI, that are sure for the captain to call in any kind of emergency. So, for example, if the captain had a crew member who broke his ankle, captain would call the QI, the qualified individual, and they tell the QI the problem. Bang, QI takes care of it, sends a helicopter, drops a new crew member off, takes the injured crew member to the hospital, done. So the captain made his call, the emergency call to the QI, and even more incredibly, he got voicemail.
Captain Lawrence, Captain Davidson. Thursday morning, Bow 700. We have a navigational incident. I'll keep it short. A scuttle popped open on 2 deck. We have some free communication of water going down the 3-hold. Have a pretty good list. I just wanted to touch base, contact you verbally here. Everybody's safe, but I wanted to talk to you.
Let's do a translation of what we just heard. Effectively, the captain is telling the qualified individual that his ship is sinking. Free communication of water means water is flowing into the ship and they can't stop it. A list means the ship is tilting to one side. He didn't mention they lost power 30 minutes ago. So the ship is lying dead in the water. This was the time to declare an all-out emergency. Instead, Captain Davidson was Mr. Cool speaking to the QI. Doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense to anybody else. But a minute later, Davidson called the after-hours number. This is 60 seconds later, and he must have had an epiphany.
Oh man, the clock is ticking. Could I please speak to our QI?
A few minutes later, the captain sounded the general alarm and told everybody to abandon ship. 31 of 33 crew donned survival suits and got into the life rafts and got off the ship into Hurricane Joaquin, which was now a Category 4 storm with sustained winds above 155 miles per hour. The one thing to remember about hurricanes, it is not a linear scale. The Category 1 storm has a certain amount of destructive power. Category 2 storm has more, and so on. It is not a straight line. It's what's called the logarithmic scale. I won't bore you with the math, but a Category 4 storm has 250 times the destructive power of a Category 1 storm. 250 times. So the crew didn't have much chance, but they were able to get off the ship. Remaining on the ship were the captain and the one crewman, the 800-foot ship now lying sideways and helpless, being battered, with the captain on the top of the bridge, the crewman on the bottom, and the captain proves to us an important point. Just because there are a lot of bad decisions made, bad decisions by the captain, bad decisions by Tote. Where was Tote in all this? They're in the command center. They see the ship heading into the storm. They didn't want to raise their hand and make a delayed shipment and cost everybody money. It goes to my new favorite saying is, something was wrong, but nobody dared make a change. Nobody dared fix it. So as we listen to the last words of the voice recorder, we remember that, again, because you made a bunch of bad decisions, you committed a bunch of stupidities, doesn't make you a bad person.
I'm not leaving you.
This episode was recorded at Summerfield Studios, narrated and produced by me, George Polari. Music consulting by Jimmy Lorius of Kalu Calais. Sound consulting by Chris Perazio. Editorial review provided by J.D. Clanky and Milen Hyrayan. And never forget, 80% of success is avoiding stupidity.